The story begins on a very peaceful day, suddenly interrupted by an erupting volcano that shakes the entire forest, even startling a dinosaur whose mouth is drooling as it looks rather ugly. The scene then shifts to a corner where someone is sneaking through the tall grass, only to reveal a group of people armed with weapons, carefully moving into the forest. Suddenly, a huge, terrifying monster with glowing red eyes and a sinister grin appears behind one of the men. The man immediately senses the evil aura, and chaos breaks out among the hunters. They try to defend themselves with their weapons, but the monster roars ferociously and overpowers them with brutal attacks. One hunter, however, grips his sword tightly and charges forward with incredible speed. With a swift spin, he slices off the monster's tail, arms, legs, and even the claws from both its hands and feet, cutting through the grass as well. In the blink of an eye, the hunter chops the monster apart like a vegetable, the creature's blood splattering behind him, a clear display of just how powerful and fearless this handsome warrior truly is. The scene changed to the fight of the handsome warrior, already broadcasting on a big digital screen to the world of Dispatch. A man stood watching, admiring the warrior with sparkling eyes. He was none other than our boy Chansu, but suddenly, a hand grabbed his shoulder. It was his boss, shouting at him for not working and for being useless while standing there wasting time. With the sudden interruption, he was scared to death and immediately apologized to the boss. But rather than accepting his apology, the old bald boss began taunting him, saying that this is why youngsters these days are a problem, always lost in strange fantasies. He barked at him to hurry and clear out the vines, nagging the poor boy non-stop. Chansu moved quickly, his voice trembling with fear, answering yes to everything. He knew he was already leaving a bad impression on his very first day, and in his mind he kept thinking about how he couldn't afford to lose this job or get fired again, since earning money was too important. Meanwhile, the old man started to nag again, saying that back in his days, even without being told, they handled things right away. With a miserable look, the boy grabbed his trusty scythe and began cutting the vines. Using his speed, he cleared them in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, the old bald man continued nagging, once again rambling about how back in his days, things were handled better. But before he could vomit out more useless praise, his words were cut short. He was stunned by the boy's speed and scythe work. The vines were being cleared just like how your girlfriend cleared your bank account. The shocking sight silenced the old boss completely, leaving him speechless. The boy finished clearing every vine, collected them in bags, and stacked them into neat piles. In disbelief, the boss muttered, questioning how it was possible that there was still a young man like this nowadays. Finally, he told the boy to just throw the trash away and head home. The scene shifted to the thoughts of Chansu, where he reflected on Dispatch, wondering if to him it truly was nothing more than a fantasy. The story unfolded, revealing that Earth had been ruined like a game whose service had ended. The planet had lost its vitality, and people were suffering and starving, struggling without resources. In that desperate time, an answer had been revealed by some nameless absolute dispatched to another world. The dispatchers fought in the other world for resources. Heroes who departed from Earth as dispatchers brought back vitality, and with it, humanity barely managed to survive. The wind swirled around, focusing on Chansu as he stood in a pitiful state, sadness etched across his face. His eyes lingered on the scythe, and in a quiet, heavy tone, his heart longed to join the ranks of the dispatchers. Yet uncertainty consumed him. He did not know if he could ever become one of them. As the sun went down, Chansu let out a tired sigh, walking through a lonely valley in confusion, wondering whether tomorrow too he would be called for work. He exhaled once more and made his way toward the Dispatch Reunion Center. A huge crowd had gathered there, the hall packed with restless voices. Chansu was shoved aside by those around him, treated as nothing more than an inconvenience. His turn to meet the owner of the center was approaching, though the atmosphere pressed heavily on him. At last, the owner asked his name. With a nervous voice, Chansu inquired about progress in the investigation regarding his family. The owner, however, ignored the question entirely. His eyes instead focused on the balance of the reunion down payment, 4,367,201, still insufficient. Without concern for the desperation before him, the owner declared that the center was not a place that ran on air and that investigations required full payment. With a dismissive wave of the hand, he told Chansu to return only when the amount was complete. Then he turned away, already calling the next person forward. The crowd pushed Chansu back. It became clear that the reunion center cared only for money, not the pleas of those searching for loved ones. Chansu had not been given even a fragment of news. All he wanted was to know the location of his family. Instead, he was shoved aside once again. A muscular man forced him back, sneering that he was not the only one with such circumstances. Chansu left with a miserable sigh. The crowd was thick, but still he felt utterly alone, as if the entire world had turned its back on him. The world itself had descended into chaos, where no kindness remained, only greed. People shoved and fought for their turns, quarreling over scraps, reflecting the grim state of humanity. When he reached home, Chansu quietly announced his return to no one, removed his shoes, and dropped his bag on the floor. Cans rolled out and scattered across the room. One can, spinning along the floor, triggered a memory, a football from his childhood. The memory unfolded. His father, once a top-ranked returner, stood before him. Their family had been peaceful, happy. His father had laughed, asking if they should play another round of football. But as Earth's condition worsened, his father had been dispatched once again. Chansu remembered how his father had always walked behind him, guiding his steps. Then suddenly he was gone. In the end, he never returned. Another memory surfaced. His mother's face appeared, assuring him she would go find his father and return quickly. She promised it would only be for a few days, telling him to sleep alone for a while and wait quietly. But those days stretched endlessly. He was left alone, crying, clinging to fading memories until even their faces became unclear. His thoughts were shattered by a sudden flash outside the window, lighting his room. Confused, he rushed forward. Through the glass, he saw a blazing trail tearing across the night sky before crashing violently into the ground. The shockwave hurled him back, his head striking the wall as he collapsed. The light vanished with a strange, ringing sound. Pain surged through him as he struggled to his feet, dazed and desperate to understand what had happened. His phone lit up. A name appeared, A, alongside a disaster alert warning of the aftermath of returner A's forced return. Another alert followed. Emergency. Grade 5 returner A announces retirement. Chansu's eyes widened in disbelief. He scrolled through his phone, finding a video of returner A addressing the world. In a weary but resolute voice, A confessed he had failed to protect God. Because of that failure, every dispatcher who had gone with him was lost. He had been forced to return alone, stripped of both ability and qualification to be dispatched again. The internet erupted with breaking news. The earthquake and blinding flash had been the aftermath of A's emergency return. In the broadcast, A admitted that after much deliberation he had chosen retirement. He pleaded with the world to understand, and in a voice filled with both sorrow and determination, urged humanity to protect Earth at all costs and never lose courage. Chansu stared at the screen, transfixed, his disbelief spilling into quiet mutterings. The news worsened with every headline, dispatchers, and returners vanishing one after another, Earth's population dropping below 500 million, and the grim possibility that no new returners would appear again. His chest tightened with disappointment and despair. Failure of a mission was one thing, but retirement of a figure like A, it was crushing. The sound of a doorbell broke the silence, and Chansu froze, unsettled by the sudden disturbance. Another knock followed, louder this time, echoing through the quiet room. With hesitant steps, he moved toward the door, confusion clouding his mind, for no visitor was expected at such an hour. Outside, the faint glow of a tablet screen flickered before him, and upon it appeared an unusual figure. A rabbit, not ordinary, but one that spoke with a clear voice, asking if Mr. O. Chansu lived there. When he opened the door, the hallway appeared empty, deepening his suspicion that someone was playing a prank. Yet the same voice sounded again, instructing him to look down. As his gaze lowered, his breath seized. Before him stood a real rabbit, alive and moving, its small body trembling as it repeated its question, nervously addressing him by name. The impossible reality struck Chansu like a storm. The creature before him was truly speaking. The rabbit steadied itself, puffed its cheeks, and with a bright and cheerful expression declared the purpose of its arrival. In a jubilant tone, it extended congratulations to Chansu, proclaiming him chosen as a dispatcher. Those words crashed upon him like thunder, leaving him frozen in disbelief. Chanso was bewildered as he wondered about what was going on and why some mysterious talking bunny was pranking him with this nonsense. But the bunny was still calm, understanding that Chanso might have been confused. So the creature took out its identity card, telling the boy that it was from the World Dispatch Support Center, confirming that it was indeed true that Chanso had been chosen as a dispatcher. If he was still suspicious, then they should move somewhere else to talk more freely. As the scene shifted, we saw that both Chanso and the rabbit were walking around in a large hallway, which was dimly lit from one side as light was coming in. The rabbit asked Chanso if he had any special skills to count on, explaining that most people had at least one of them. But Chanso got annoyed, telling the rabbit that it must know he was ineligible for dispatch because the only thing he was good at was trimming trees and flowers without any mercy, and he didn't really have anything special to show other than that. The rabbit was shocked, wondering how it was possible, and Chanso was even more surprised because the rabbit didn't know this but still made him eligible. However, the rabbit dismissed the question, telling the boy that it was fine and that everything happens for a reason, and the fact that the boy was chosen didn't change, so he should relax. Hearing that, Chanso was a bit relieved, thanking the bunny, but he still wondered how he was actually inside the dispatch center because it was unbelievable, wondering if his chance had really come or not. Suddenly, both Chanso and the rabbit were standing in front of a huge stone door with its own majestic view. The rabbit told the boy that they should head inside and keep talking. As soon as Chanso grabbed the handle and started opening it, he realized that even though beyond the door the dispatch agency was there, the thing which was anticlimactic was that the door was not opening at all. The boy knew that it wouldn't even budge due to its heavy weight. The rabbit was surprised, wondering what Chanso was doing because it was just a fancy door that wouldn't open for anyone, and the entrance was right over where the rabbit was. Chanso came running toward the rabbit, but as he saw the entrance, he was shocked to the core, wondering if that was the actual door because it was completely small by human standards. Chanso criticized the rabbit, wondering if it was dumb and blind, asking how he was supposed to fit in there. But the rabbit just had one excuse, that the door had been working fine for him up until this time. Chanso pointed out that it was because the creature was a rabbit. He turned around, completely shattered, thinking that he shouldn't have expected anything good from the start and that he should just go home. But suddenly, the rabbit started speaking in a more serious tone, asking Chanso if he was really sure about that, because he had failed every test and was ruled ineligible in the dispatch center exam. Even if Chanso wanted to, he would never get a chance like this again. The rabbit was still smiling even when it was being so serious, telling Chanso not to misunderstand, but that it was just quoting him, saying that either way, it would be a shame if he believed in leaving, because for anyone in the whole world, getting chosen was not that easy, and he was just letting that chance go. The rabbit had made such a funny situation serious, and now Chanso knew that he would have to do anything it took. The rabbit started walking toward the small gate, and Chanso followed, not on 2 but on 4 legs. Even when he wondered what he was doing, he still decided to enter the gate like a rabbit, not even knowing what he was doing anymore. As Chanso crawled as fast as he could, the rabbit was continuously slapping the door, telling him to come fast. As soon as he entered inside, he saw a fairly big room with enough space to fit multiple humans. He couldn't believe that the office was more normal inside than he had expected, and the rabbit wondered what he was imagining because this was the whole dispatch center. The rabbit didn't mind and immediately told Chanso that there was a world perfect for him. Hearing that, the boy wondered if there were different worlds for different people, and the rabbit explained that it was indeed true, and what Chanso would be doing was called a block-type territory capture. The rabbit smiled and handed Chanso a book, but as the boy was repeating everything the rabbit said, the creature thought that maybe the boy knew about it. As Chanso was acting confident, he revealed that he had never heard about it and was just wondering if it was some kind of weird place. The rabbit was now getting annoyed, wondering why Chanso was acting so excited if he knew nothing about anything. When the rabbit calmed down, it patiently explained to Chanso that the territory capture zone was the hottest place right now, and it was under the protection of a god. It remembered that the returnee it had seen retiring was also serving a god. and the rabbit assured Chanso that the god related to the retiree was not related to him in any way, so he should rest easy. The boy sighed and wondered which god he was going to get, and the rabbit explained that normally one was assigned randomly, but if he chose right now, he would get the special chance to choose for himself. A golden pendant worn by the rabbit started glowing as multiple cards floated in the air through magic. The rabbit grabbed a handful and asked Chanso which one he would choose. Out of the 3 cards, the boy wondered what he should do because he didn't even know which god was good and which was not. The rabbit knew that this was a rare chance and told him that a choice like this would never come again. Chanso suddenly remembered his parents and realized that he might never get another chance with his luck. He wondered why he was hesitating like an idiot when he was getting a chance that many others couldn't even dream of. Chanso decided to take the middle card, and as he flipped it around, he saw a menacing view that made his face turn pale. It was a skeleton monster with multiple undead skeletons coming out from the ground. It was so realistic that Chanso started screaming, wondering what it was. We came to know that it was the god of negation with a probability of 44%. The rabbit wondered why Chanso was so shocked, saying it was just a presentation and nothing else. The boy fell to the ground, wondering what kind of god needed such a flashy intro when a normal one would have worked fine. Even the name, God of Negation, gave him a bad feeling. Chanso didn't see any chance but still wondered if he could pick again, and the rabbit didn't even hesitate, agreeing to let the boy try immediately. But no matter how many times he picked, he always got the God of Negation. This time, the probability was 45%. The boy screamed that the whole thing was rigged because he kept pulling the same god again and again. Suddenly, the rabbit became serious once again, telling Chanso that no matter what happened, the cards were completely fine. The boy sensed a deadly aura coming from the rabbit and quickly changed the topic, saying he wasn't necessarily blaming the cards, but something still felt off. The boy wondered why the rabbit was suddenly so serious, but the creature went back to work, asking Chanso to choose fast but carefully. Chanso was nervous, his face pale, wondering what would happen. He wanted anything except negation and prayed to get something else while covering his face. When he finally pulled the last card, a different one appeared. This one had a green aura and flower petals swirling around it. Chanso was overjoyed to finally get a different card from the god of negation. Even though the presentation was plain, he realized he had received the Goddess of Abundance card with a 0.0000001% chance. He wondered why the display was so simple if the card was that rare. He knew the odds were insanely low, and if it was the Goddess of Abundance, he would have a good time. The rabbit immediately noticed Chanso's expression and asked him if he didn't like the card and wanted another chance. This shocked Chanso since just moments ago, the rabbit had said this was his last chance. He wondered what would happen if he chose the Goddess of Abundance, and the rabbit told him that he would be dispatched immediately to the new world. The boy was hesitant after hearing that, but the rabbit wondered why Chanso was hesitating when this was his chance to go beyond. A dispatcher had to become a returnee, and everyone would admire his decision. The boy imagined himself on a stage full of cheering people while the rabbit kept flattering him, saying he might even become a savior and people would follow him. But then the rabbit grew serious again, telling Chanso to think carefully because it was a life completely different from his old one. Chanso knew that if he stayed on Earth, he would just keep running like always. He had to decide if he wanted to change his life or not. Finally, Chanso agreed. He was congratulated by the system, which told him that he now served the Goddess of Abundance. The image of the chosen god appeared, a beautiful woman with elegant yet slightly revealing attire. Everything looked magnificent. The system welcomed Chanso, and the goddess spoke to him, calling him the prospective dispatcher. As the cards started glowing and levitating, Chanso wondered if the voice he heard was the goddess herself. After seeing her, he thought that with a goddess like that, he could do anything he wanted. After activation, the boy asked where he had to go, and the rabbit flicked the air. The card transformed into a violent, volcanic portal with dark energy swirling around it. The rabbit pushed Chanso toward the portal, but he stopped, terrified. The creature asked if there was a problem. Chanso was scared because the thing in front of him didn't look safe at all. But according to the rabbit, objects didn't have moods, and if he looked closer, the portal would seem beautiful. Chanso thought the rabbit was either kind or insane because anyone could see that it looked like a deadly black hole. Still, he knew he couldn't back down anymore. Determined, he decided to enter the portal no matter how dangerous it seemed. However, before he could move, the rabbit kicked him straight into the portal with its legs. Chanso spun midair, cursing the rabbit multiple times as he disappeared into the portal, while the creature just smiled, looking forward to what Chanso could accomplish. Suddenly, a strange, static noise echoed in the rabbit's ears, asking why it had done that. The rabbit was shocked, replying that the voice shouldn't interfere because direct intervention was forbidden. The voice insisted they couldn't afford to lose Chanso, but the rabbit remained firm, saying it had followed its god's will. As the scene shifted, the system window appeared, loading. When it finished, Chanso was greeted by a message that shook him to the core. It revealed that the gods' percentage on the card showed the size of their influence, not their probability. The boy was horrified. He had been completely scammed, realizing that the goddess of abundance's influence was practically nothing. Before he could process it, another portal opened, and he was thrown into a deserted land filled with intense heat and dried grass. The ground was cracked, and the trees were dead. Chanso couldn't believe he had been tricked into such a miserable situation. Crying, he watched as the system window popped up again, confirming it clearly. Goddess of Abundance, 0.0000001% influence. Chanso thought that he was so screwed that he was laughing and smiling at his stupidity at the same time, and he started looking all around at the ruins, wondering about why the rabbit told him that he was going to the Goddess of Abundance when this whole desolate landscape was anything other than abundant. But suddenly, a system notification popped in, and Chanso turned around, wondering about what was wrong with the system window again. But it welcomed our boy to the block-type territory capture world, and that the boy was the apostle of abundance, and he had to secure as many territories as possible through territory capture. Chanso was not happy because even when he was an apostle, he had to capture territories for the goddess just because her influence was that low. He decided to not waste any time and take a look around instead so that he could also find the goddess of abundance too. But suddenly, something struck his foot, and he realized that it was a sickle, wondering about what it was doing in such a desolated place, and why it was a sickle out of all things. Wondering if someone used it and threw it away because it felt familiar, which was kind of strange but still soothing. But suddenly, Chanso felt that something was behind him, and it was a huge thing, or so Chanso thought, with a glaring aura that was capable of killing anything, or at least that's what Chanso thought of a monster, wondering about why this was happening to him even when he had not even met the goddess yet, and had already encountered a monster. He knew that he could not die like this, and at least he could use the sickle to threaten the monster if the push came to shove. But just as the boy turned around swinging his sickle, he saw that the monster was actually kind of small. It was then that the boy was conscious once again as he saw a cute little hamster who was crying because of the show that our boy had put on with the sickle, squeaking like crazy and wondering if his life was coming to an end. Even Chanso wondered if this cute little thing could even be called a monster because it didn't look hostile at all, and the hamster squeaked as if he agreed to what the boy said. But suddenly, the boy turned into an evil being, thinking that even when it was small, it was still a monster, so maybe he would get something if he caught it. The hamster immediately turned pale, wondering about what the apostle was thinking, and he started dancing and crying all of a sudden, trying to somehow stop the boy from doing so, squeaking like a crazy hamster he was. And as the creature was really cute-looking, Chanso decided that he would not do something drastic because as long as this kind of monster did not swarm him in groups or do something hostile, it should be okay. The hamster finally stopped crying, knowing that he was not being slaughtered immediately, so he started jumping around and squeaking while Chanso wondered about where the creature was leaving. But in reality, we saw that the cute little hamster was actually squeaking and growling at the boy, as if telling him that he should follow. Chanso realized what the creature was trying to say, and he started running towards where the hamster was going, but still, the cute creature was so much faster than our boy, leaping bounds even before Chanso could catch up. He knew that for such a tiny thing, the hamster was super fast, and he wondered about where on earth the creature was going. Finally, after a lot of squeaking and running, the hamster stopped, and what Chanso saw was actually shocking to see in such a desolate place. He discovered water, which was really pure, and he immediately filled it inside the bottle that he brought. Chanso drank the water along with the hamster, who was licking it, and both of them enjoyed the refreshing taste of the water, as Chanso even wondered about how the water was so refreshing when the whole place was a complete desert. Even the hamster enjoyed the drink, and both of them sat down near the water spring, as Chanso started asking the hamster if he lived in this territory, because it did not seem like a great place for the hamster to live. The hamster was not saying anything, and Chanso was still throwing questions at the creature, asking him about where the goddess was, who was really, really abundant. The hamster was ignoring the boy and was looking really confused as the boy wondered about what was going on. He was licking all over his body as if cleaning something, and Chanso realized that, as expected, communication was impossible. But suddenly, the hamster remembered and started squeaking, as if telling Chanso that he would have to follow the creature once again. Both of them started running once again, but this time they took it slow, and even Chanso was curious about where the hamster was going to take him. As the scene shifted, we came to a giant tree that was almost dried up with dried leaves falling, but the tree was still standing. And Chanso wondered about how it was possible in such a deserted area. He realized that it was a really big tree, but since it was dried out, it had no fruits or flowers. It looked just like the trees back on Earth. But as the boy approached the trunk of the tree to touch it, he felt like something was beneath his feet, and he wondered about what it was. The boy immediately removed his foot, and he saw a golden-looking ginseng which had the footprint of our boy on it. Chanso wondered about what a ginseng was doing there, and it was still quite healthy for such a dried-up place. Looking at that, the hamster started squeaking as his face turned pale. He wondered about what would happen, and the hamster immediately grabbed the ginseng, hugging it and crying like crazy, squeaking like it was the end of the world. Still, Chanso was not able to understand what was going on, thinking that maybe the ginseng was the hamster's pet. But suddenly, the system notification popped up, telling the boy that he had finally discovered the god of this area. Chanso thought that maybe the system was acting up once again because he was sure that it was all nonsense. Because if he discovered the goddess, then where on earth was the goddess? Because all the giant things he saw were actually just the tree. But suddenly, the hamster started nabbing onto the pants of the boy, squeaking on, and Chanso wondered about why the creature was doing this. The hamster was throwing its cute little claws onto the boy, while he tried to explain to the creature that he was busy right now, deciding to play with the hamster later. But then the cute little creature pointed towards the ginseng, squeaking and crying, and then acting like a goddess. And then it was as if the hamster was splattered. With everything that the hamster did, Chanso immediately realized that the shriveled-up ginseng that he put his foot on was actually the goddess, and he was the one who damaged it completely. At first, Chanso was not believing it, telling the hamster that it was impossible because his goddess was supposed to be truly abundant, and there's no way that some dried-up ginseng was a goddess in any way. But suddenly, the ginseng started having itself covered in a green light, and Chanso was not able to believe that the ginseng was actually healing itself as it was alive. But Chanso knew that the goddess he saw wasn't some lousy weed like that, and was a crazy-looking woman. But then the hamster came in with a magnifying glass on which it was written in really small letters that the image he was seeing in the presentation might differ from the actual product. It was then that he saw that he was scammed, while the hamster squeaked once again, knowing that whatever Chanso did was actually wrong. We see that the boy was now on his knees, realizing that he had finished the goddess even before he got the chance of becoming the apostle. He then came to realize that the territory capture and those percentages were foreshadowing how low-powered the goddess actually was. And now that he thought of it, he remembered the flashback. When he drew the card of the god of negation, the numbers kept going up, and he thought that it was just an error dismissing it. But now he knew that the number was going up, because the influence was expanding again and again. Chanso started blaming the rabbit, thinking that there was no way that such a good card of a powerful god would keep appearing again and again, as it was really lowering the legitimacy of it. But just then, something else came into Chanso's mind as he wondered if the goddess became like this because her influence had been shrinking again and again. Now that a lot of time had passed, Chanso wondered about why the goddess was not waking up while the hamster was just squeaking and crying. Then Chanso realized that maybe he did land the finishing blow in just one footstep, so the boy grabbed the water bottle and opened the cap, deciding to give the ginseng some water first, thinking that she might be shriveled from thirst. The boy started dropping the water slowly but surely, and the ginseng started taking a normal shape rather than shriveling. The boy realized that it was working, so he poured all the water onto the ginseng, deciding to give her as much as she wanted. But the hamster's face turned pale as he saw what the apostle was doing. On the other hand, we see that the ginseng was getting refreshed, wondering if it was raining because it had been so long since she had had water. It was feeling good for a moment, but then it started pouring quite a lot, and even when the ginseng was screaming to stop, it was not stopping. The plant realized that at this rate, she would really drown and become lifeless, so she got up, screaming and coughing like crazy. Chanso was happy that his rescue was finally complete, while the hamster was crying because the goddess was not dead. As the ginseng slowly got up, being annoyed, the boy introduced himself as the Apostle of Abundance, Chanso. Finally, after a nervous introduction, the boy looked at the god, but he wondered about how this ginseng was a god when she couldn't even move properly with her legs shaking like crazy. The boy had no idea about what he was supposed to do now, but suddenly, a system notification popped up, telling him that he would have to use skills to become even stronger. Chanso wondered about what the skills were, reading that it was the blessing of abundance, and even when there was no description, he thought that obviously this skill must be for making crops abundant. But then, slowly, the skill appeared, and Chanso read it with shock that he had got the D-level skill Decapitate. Chanso was shocked and his face was pale, wondering if this word meant what he was thinking, as in cutting off heads. Chanso wondered about why the goddess was so cruel, decapitating heads when she was just the goddess of abundance, thinking that maybe she was some kind of sadist or psychotic. Chanso was not ready to believe that the goddess of abundance would give him such a violent skill, so he decided to ask the goddess about what the skill Decapitate meant, and if it was exactly what he was thinking. The ginseng immediately became serious and made signs of cutting heads, and the boy realized that he was indeed thinking right, wondering if the gods really wanted him to cut off heads. He found the ginseng had a serious face which did not even falter, and now Chanso started to reason with this weird request, remembering a Wikipedia page that he read, guessing that maybe since the goddess of abundance was related to agriculture and slaughtering was included in poetry, it was somehow included in it. But just then, the boy turned around as he heard the squeaking of the happy hamster, who was happy that the goddess was revived. But on the other hand, Chanso wondered if the hamster was included in his objective of decapitation too, while we see that the hamster was unaware of what the apostle was thinking. The hamster turned around after listening to the voice of Chanso, but this was the second time he saw the serious boy with the sickle in his hand, while he apologized to the cute little hamster. His eyes glinted with crimson red as he thought that he was just an apostle and should finish the mission without becoming too attached to something. The hamster was squeaking crazily, and as the boy swung his scythe, the creature somehow managed to dodge it while squeaking and running straight behind the goddess Ginseng, who was also shocked, wondering what Chanso was doing as the hamster cried. Somehow the goddess protected the creature, but Chanso explained that he did not want to do this either. It was all for the goddess. The hamster's face was turning pale as he squeaked, and both the goddess and the hamster were screaming with their faces turned pale. As the boy turned around, he wondered if there was something more terrifying, and he was shocked to see some mud puddles with finger-like structures. Wondering about what it was, he saw that the thing completely formed and looked like it was made of mud, with multiple openings for its eyes. Chanso wondered what it was, as both the goddess and the hamster were desperate, and it was as if the hamster was talking to the goddess, immediately coming in front even while crying, trying to protect her. Even Chanso realized that the little guy was not a monster but just a cute little creature, and instead, this muddy-looking figure was the real monster to begin with. He turned toward this filthy monster, realizing that he would have to deal with it. Otherwise, the goddess would be in danger. He wondered if he could do it, so he grabbed the scythe tightly and decided to do it anyway, running toward the mud monster. He realized he could see clearly where he would have to cut for the monster's life to end. The system immediately activated, telling the boy that he could activate the skill Decapitate after identifying the line, and the boy immediately did so, launching himself into the air and slashing the head of the mud monster with his sickle in one fell swoop without missing. For the boy, it was as if he was cutting thin weed, which shocked the hamster, turning him to stone. Even the goddess was unable to believe what she had just witnessed. The mud monster immediately turned into ashes and was obliterated out of existence while Chanso landed, wondering if the goddess and the hamster were all right. The hamster was crying while shivering, and Chanso could not believe that this little creature had been protecting the goddess in that brief moment without hesitation. Realizing it was his mistake, Chanso knelt down and put his head onto the ground, confessing that it was a stupid mistake on his part, and he should not have done it, wondering if the cute little hamster would forgive him. Even the hamster tried talking to the goddess, and both of them agreed while showing a cute little thumbs up to the boy. Even Chanso smiled, thanking Hamdel for forgiving him. The hamster wondered who Hamdel was, and Chanso just smiled, telling the cute little creature that he came up with this name because calling him a creature felt too unfamiliar when they were being so nice to each other. Chanso said they would need one if they were going to be together from now on, and the hamster liked it so much that he cried while squeaking. Both Hamdel and the goddess danced around while a system notification popped up, and the boy turned around, wondering why the system kept appearing behind him rather than in front. The system told him that the head of the monster would automatically be teleported according to the skill's effect, and a status bar showed that Chanso had slain an immortal demon out of an unidentified number. The boy realized that the monster's name was Immortal Demon and wondered why the name was so terrifying for its difficulty. The system told the boy that the teleported tribute now belonged to the goddess, and as Chanso turned around, he noticed that somehow the ginseng's color had gotten brighter and its skin had become smoother. The boy wondered if the goddess would return to her beautiful form if he kept doing this, and motivated, he bid farewell to the goddess and started running toward more monsters with Hamdel. As the scene shifted, we saw that Chanso had come to a really murky-looking place full of immortal mud demons crawling toward him after sensing his presence. Suddenly, a system notification popped up, telling Chanso that unidentified points existed and could be used to utilize the world system, but could not be traded between individuals. Chanso wondered what it was, while even the hamster looked at the system window which was visible to him. He realized it seemed like a good thing, so he decided to deal with the mud monsters first because they were annoying, and even the hamster was scared of them. The boy was thankful to the goddess that he had an amazing skill, which was surprisingly easy to use despite its power, and to top it off, the mud monsters were really slow. So Chanso immediately rushed at them, using the Decapitate asterisk skill to clear the heads of each and every mud monster he could find. The system notified the boy that he had acquired points by hunting monsters, and as he looked at this, Chanso nervously wondered what it was. Due to all the motion, the hamster was almost getting motion sickness, and when Chanso said he wanted to hunt 100 immortal demons, the hamster was even more shocked. Chanso had killed 4 of them and wanted to do more. After the hunt, as he returned to the tree once again, the hamster was full of pride, holding his head high and squeaking brightly, as if he was telling the goddess about what the boy did to those immortal demons. But Chanso told Hamdel that maybe anyone watching the creature would think that he was the one who caught them all instead of anyone else. The hamster was annoyed by this remark and started scratching the boy's hair, which was really ticklish, making him laugh. As Chanso normalized, he wondered why the monster was called the Immortal Demon when it was way too easy to kill to be called immortal. But as Chanso was walking, he didn't think much about it, guessing that maybe he would find out more about these monsters if he kept hunting them. Meanwhile, the goddess was sitting near the tree, looking even shinier and glossier than before due to all the monsters hunted by Chanso. This much was expected from the boy, who knew that the goddess had become more bountiful, but the effect was far better than he thought. Maybe the goddess he saw in the picture would actually come true. The hamster knew something was not right with the apostle, but Chanso did not care, knowing that at this rate, she might return to her original form soon, which was more important. Just then the goddess started walking. Her legs were no longer wobbling, and Chanso guessed that she wanted to say something. The goddess came near the giant tree that was present there, standing and calling out to the apostle while signaling upward. Chanso realized that he should lift Lady Ginseng, and as soon as he did that, the goddess immediately touched the tree. When nothing happened, she wanted Chanso to also put his hands on the tree trunk. The boy was curious, wondering what would happen, but as soon as they placed their hands on the tree, a system notification asked Chanso if he wanted to use his skill * blessing of abundance on the tree, since all blessings consume points. Chanso wondered what the * blessing of abundance was, but then he decided to use it, shocking both the hamster and the goddess as a green aura surrounded his body from top to bottom. It was as if Chanso was surging with energy. He decided to use all the points he had earned from hunting the monsters, pouring them all into the tree and filling it with green natural energy. As Chanso was becoming imbalanced, he grabbed onto the goddess like crazy, almost choking her. After the blessing was finished, the twisted tree that had been standing all dried up was now full of greenery, with fresh leaves and lush branches along with a dense bark strong enough to hold for generations. The whole tree was filled with delicious-looking apples that were truly abundant, and the atmosphere suddenly changed as cherry blossoms began falling. Chanso wondered what he had done. He had just poured in some points he had gained, but this much abundance had immediately appeared. Even the goddess was shocked, and the hamster was also surprised, having never seen something like this before. The first thing the boy noticed was that the tree held many apples, which were a delicacy even on Earth. Chanso had never seen one back on Earth, wondering if apples were always such big and heavy fruits. The boy wanted to try one right away, but first, he decided to offer the first harvest to the goddess of abundance instead. Lady Ginseng was happy as she grabbed the apple slowly, feeling it, but then she turned serious and tried to do something. Chanso didn't care, only hoping that the goddess would regain her former appearance soon, thinking that maybe her current form was also pretty in its own right. But slowly, Chanso noticed that the apple he gave to the goddess was shriveling up as she absorbed it. It was as if a demonic force had possessed the apple, making it look like something out of a Death Note world. After the absorption was complete, the goddess left the shriveled apple and burped before returning to normal once again. For Chanso, this was traumatizing, as he wondered how the goddess could absorb such a beautiful apple without mercy. Chanso immediately grabbed as many apples as he could, knowing he had better not get on her bad side. As they gathered apples, Chanso asked the hamster if maybe they should eat too after listening to the goddess. Meanwhile, as he tasted some apples, Chanso wondered why a god who granted such a terrifying skill like * decapitate was the god of abundance, realizing he couldn't let his guard down because the goddess was dangerous. Even though he didn't want to lower his guard, he tasted the apple for the first time and decided it was delicious, sharing it with the cute hamster. The apple was so incredibly delicious that it didn't seem like an apple at all, even though Chanso had never tasted one on Earth. As both the hamster and the boy ate to their hearts' content, the ginseng watched them from behind the tree, nervous. We saw that even the goddess could speak her own language, wondering how Chanso had defeated monsters and grown a giant tree in just one day, something comparable to a miracle. The goddess wondered where a monster like Chanso had even come from. The scene shifts, and we get another flashback where we come to know that the faction responsible for food supply was actually called Abundance, which was famous for its high-quality crops. This faction was far from weak, but once the Negation faction began absorbing other factions, Abundance had no choice but to flee to survive. The Abundance faction shut down its trade and started hunting monsters, but their forces were not built for battle since they were farmers instead. Slowly losing their lives at the hands of the monsters, they couldn't win a single fight. As a last resort, the Abundance faction started altering their basic skill harvest and turned it into Decapitate. Even then, they couldn't save the Abundance faction from collapse because Negation was just that powerful. Decapitate wasn't even a real combat skill. It was meant for emergency use in cutting off monsters' heads. It was merely modified to bring back the heads of dead animals or monsters. In the present, the goddess Ginseng was horrified, thinking that even though Abundance and warriors didn't mix, Decapitate was the best they could manage. If someone were insanely strong, even Decapitate would work like a charm, and maybe that monstrously strong guy was actually Chanso. As our boy turned around with his sight, the goddess imagined him as a serial killer who only thought of killing. Looking at him, the lady was shocked, but on the other hand, Chancellor just wanted to ask for some more apples. The goddess couldn't disagree with anything the boy said, knowing that it was dangerous for her. She wondered how a kid like this had ended up in the abundance zone. Just then, she had another naughty idea, thinking that no matter what, Chancellor was hers to claim now and no one could separate them. But as the goddess was looking at our boy, Chanso wondered what the goddess was doing and if she needed any help. The goddess, in her ginseng form, just hugged the boy's leg because that was all she could manage for now, deciding that she wouldn't hand Chanso over to anyone else no matter what. As she hugged him, Chanso thought that maybe the goddess was now going to absorb him instead. But that horror never came true. The scene shifts to evening time. The boy was holding a basket full of apples as he came near the altar where the goddess was already asleep. He knew she must have been really tired after growing a single giant tree all by herself with his help due to her low influence. Even the hamster had a long day, so Chanso thought maybe he should sleep too. As they were playing together cutely, suddenly thunder struck a distant area. The boy wondered what it was, feeling afraid. As he turned around, he saw that the goddess was still asleep but wondered why there were thunder noises all over the place. After not finding any source for some time, Chanso thought maybe he had been eating nothing but apples, and that the thunder was from his stomach instead since apples alone wouldn't cut it. Suddenly, a system notification popped up, telling Chanso that a delivery event was now in progress. Now that the boy remembered the guidebook, he realized that delivery made sense because there were so many people coming to different worlds from Earth. But Chanso still wondered how they'd know where to deliver the goods without an address. The hamster yawned, clearly tired, and the boy decided they should sleep and think about it the next day. Chanso gathered multiple leaves and made a bed for the goddess and the cute hamster using fluffy-looking leaves. The scene shifts again to the next day, but this time to Earth. There was a huge building called the Shrine of Cycle. Inside the building, a woman walked fearlessly while multiple men were scared of her, wondering what was going on. Inside a cabin, another man was writing something in a notepad when the woman suddenly entered, making him blush and wonder what she was doing there instead of handling her delivery. The lady immediately asked her senior if he was messing with her. At first, the man didn't understand what she was talking about and tried to calm her down, but the lady projected a paper in her hand, telling him that she had already sworn, and now the paper didn't even make sense. We come to know that this lady was named Sujin, and she was screaming at her senior for sending her to an off-limits zone for a 3-day, 2-night business trip, even though the man knew Sujin wasn't getting paid for it. It was just a free shipping event, and the customer only wanted apples, no money at all, in exchange for more apples, which was a very strange request. Sujin wondered if the request was genuine and why her senior had given her this job if she hadn't done anything wrong. The man explained that Sujin had done quite the opposite. She was too passionate about work. He told her that while her dedication was admirable, overdoing it continuously would wear her body down. She should use this trip as an excuse to rest properly. The senior knew that if Sujin stayed in the office, she'd dive right back into work, so she should clear her head and enjoy the free trip. But Sujin wasn't buying his sweet talk, knowing full well that the manager was sending her because there was no one else available, disguising it as a holiday. The man didn't deny it but gave her a shoulder massage, telling her to go do the job because she might stumble upon a hidden realm. Sujin got more irritated, thinking there was no way she'd find a hidden realm when even professionals couldn't. Hidden realms were sealed blocks with special effects and extremely rare. But her senior didn't care, waving her off as she was sent on her trip, justifying that something good might come out of it. The lady agreed and disappeared from the scene. The scene then shifts to Sujin checking the list of orders, wondering why the order list was so wrong. Even though it was an off-limits zone, why did the person require so many items? She hoped it wouldn't turn out to be a wild goose chase, or she wouldn't let it slide for wasting her time. Back in the abundance block, we see that Chanso was playing hide-and-seek with the hamster. He immediately caught the hamster because its fur was showing. The hamster had been hiding behind a bag full of apples, eating some while making a lot of noise. Because of all those squeaks, Chanso easily found him and saw a half-eaten apple. Chanso acted like he didn't know the hamster's location, while the creature knew it had been found. Chanso grabbed the hamster with both hands as it squeaked in protest, upset that it lost the game. Chanso, both angry and amused, scolded it for gnawing on the apples because otherwise they wouldn't sell. The hamster's cheeks were being pulled as Chanso explained that the apples were meant for trading, and the delivery was coming soon, so it shouldn't ruin them. Meanwhile, the goddess just listened as Chanso spoke. He thought that since the delivery person was coming all the way to the desolated abundance zone, he couldn't make a bad first impression. From the delivery event information, Chanso had learned that the world he was in was divided into territories called blocks, which were true to their names. These block-type territories had grand summoning events always in progress. Even though they looked like normal land, their edges shimmered like walls that players couldn't pass through. To move between blocks, one needed a transfer ticket given once per day. However, since there was nothing nearby, he knew that 1 or 2 tickets wouldn't be enough. He had already tested them and found that the nearest village was almost a week away. It wasn't worth it. Chanso realized he was almost living on apples alone and found it crazy that the delivery only took 2 days, even when he had no clue what trick the delivery people used. Still, he didn't care as long as a sleeping bag arrived. A bed would be better, but he knew not to demand too much in his situation. He also wanted a cushion for the goddess, though she disagreed. Chanso thought he should keep raising the goddess's affection toward him, or he'd end up a mummy somewhere. Suddenly, he heard a rumbling noise and grabbed his sickle, realizing that monsters were approaching. He found it strange that the monsters he defeated seemed tied to the delivery. Since yesterday, they had been coming to him on their own without any reason. Chanso found them annoying, just as their name implied. They weren't undead, but more like revived soldiers. Either way, he had to deal with them because so many monsters near the safe house wasn't safe. The boy jumped with his weapon in hand, immediately using Decapitate and slashing the heads of every monster he saw. One was left in the rear, trying to cast magic spells, but failed. The boy noticed it used solar energy and realized it was getting faster. He wondered if monsters could get stronger the same way skills did. Then he jumped toward the immortal mud demons, hacking and slashing through all of them as they advanced. He used Decapitate again and again, cutting every head he could find. Even as more monsters appeared, their speed barely improved. Their viciousness remained, making him wonder why they were still so easy to kill. Meanwhile, all of this was being witnessed by none other than Sujin, who wondered who she was seeing. The lady, wearing flying boots, had entered the zone and thought both the boy and his hamster were monsters themselves, able to kill immortal demons so easily. She imagined them as vicious beings who enjoyed the killing. As Sujin flew closer to make the delivery, her small winged shoes kept her steady in the air. She watched with sharp, focused eyes as Chanso and his hamster effortlessly took down the immortal demons, both of them grinning with a playful, almost mischievous look. She couldn't help but think how strange it was. There was a time when the immortal demon had been a prized target for hunters. Defeating one earned far more points than ordinary monsters, drawing in adventurers looking for easy rewards. But the creature always revived. Each time it returned, it grew stronger, and anyone it chased would eventually be cursed and collapse. Over the years, people gave up on hunting it and began avoiding it altogether. While Chanso was busy defeating all the immortal demons, Sujin couldn't help feeling nervous. She wondered what kind of person he was to face a ghoul so boldly, without any fear of the consequences. As she watched him more closely, she noticed something strange. He didn't seem to be using any techniques to purify the curse. That made her think he might be a sword master. But then she grew confused. If he really was that skilled, why would someone like him waste time picking apples? The thought made her more cautious. She decided it would be best not to provoke him at all. Who knew what someone that powerful might do if offended? With that in mind, she carefully flew closer to him. After defeating the immortal demons, a glowing green panel suddenly appeared in front of Chanso, displaying the points he had earned. He mentally noted that his points were increasing by 5% each time. He had already gained a total of 10%, which made him think ahead. Since blessing apples cost 1,000 points each, his current resources would easily let him manage around 100 apples in a single day. Sitting on his shoulder, the hamster also grinned happily as the points rolled in. His eyes then turned toward a nearby temple, its spire shining faintly in the light. In that moment, he finally understood why the temple was built in such a remote place. The location itself was a goldmine for earning points. Just then, Sujin landed gracefully and gave a polite bow. She called out Chanso's name from behind, pulling him out of his thoughts. When he turned around, she announced that his delivery from the Circulation Trading Company had arrived. Sujin then greeted him with a warm smile and introduced herself, explaining that she was a representative from the company. Chanso was surprised and asked how she had managed to find him in such a remote place. As they shook hands, Sujin thought to herself that he had stood out far too much to miss. She reminded herself to stay cautious. After all, anyone who could toy with an immortal demon so easily was not someone she could afford to lower her guard around. As Sujin was lost in thought, something suddenly caught her eye, the tiny hamster sitting on Chanso's shoulder. It looked like a soft, marshmallow-like creature with shiny, round eyes, standing proudly at his side. The sight made her cheeks flush, and before she knew it, she was blushing and even drooling a little. She couldn't help but imagine how nice it would feel to touch and squeeze the adorable creature. Noticing her intense stare, the hamster quickly panicked and tried to hide behind Chanso's neck. Chanso noticed Sujin's dazed expression and asked, concerned, if she was feeling unwell. She quickly snapped out of it and insisted she was fine. Still, as she clutched her chest, her mind couldn't help but wander back to the tiny hamster, wishing she could touch it. Chanso, meanwhile, insisted that it was time to head off, but Sujin couldn't resist sneaking glances at the little creature, still longing to pinch it. They walked toward the apple tree, though Sujin was still distracted by the hamster. Suddenly, her attention shifted to the air, thick with the sweet scent of ripe apples. Chanso smiled with satisfaction and remarked that the apples had grown beautifully. Sujin was impressed by the size and fragrance of the massive tree, silently wondering if it could really be an apple tree at all. Seeing her, Chanso offered her one to taste. She eagerly accepted the apple, holding it in her hands with surprise. Not only was the tree huge, but the apples themselves were enormous. She wondered if such a big fruit might be bland inside, thinking it might look impressive but taste ordinary. The moment she bit into it, juice burst from the apple, and her expression instantly turned to astonishment. The flavor was far beyond what she expected, sweet, yet perfectly balanced with a pleasant acidity. Impressed, she quickly devoured the apple, mentally calculating its value. Each one could easily sell for 50,000, maybe even 100,000 gold. Before long, they found themselves in the middle of a negotiation. Sujin explained the current selling price, repeating that each apple went for 2,000 gold. When Chanso confirmed this, she immediately declared the price absurdly low. Chanso misunderstood at first, thinking he might have pushed the price too high, and noted that some shops did sell apples cheaper. He asked how much she thought they should charge. Sujin held up 2 fingers. Looking at her gesture, Chanso muttered that 200 seemed a little low. Sujin quickly interrupted, insisting that each apple should go for at least 20,000 gold. Hearing that, both Chanso and the hamster nearly freaked out, shouting, "20,000 gold!" Sujin continued, explaining that if they supplied more to upscale department stores, the price could even exceed 30,000 gold per apple. Sujin stayed quiet, carefully weighing her options. She knew she could downplay the apples' value to make a quick profit, but she also realized the risk of deceiving someone who might become an important business partner. As she considered her choices, she reminded herself that she only had one life, and her mind couldn't help but replay the image of Chanso effortlessly battling the immortal demons. Sujin explained that these weren't just ordinary apples. They were the most delicious fruits she had ever tasted in her life. She believed they were even more valuable than any specialty product she had encountered. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out a formal, glowing contract and set the price at 20,000 gold per apple. Handing it to him, she asked him to sign. Chanso took the pen, studied the contract, and smiled. He made a few adjustments, and when Sujin saw the changes, she was surprised. Her share had increased. Chanso explained that he wanted to maintain a long-term partnership with her and genuinely appreciated her honesty about the apple's true value. Both of them shook hands, sealing the agreement. Sujin handed over the goods Chanso had ordered: seeds, food, cooking utensils, and as a special gift from circulation trading, 2 desert demon fangs. She also pulled 2 eggs from her bag. Playfully, she suggested that Chanso could take the hamster as his familiar, thinking he might not need it, while secretly admiring how cute the little creature was. Chanso looked confused, explaining that he didn't have a familiar. Sujin noted that the hamster seemed too friendly to be just a monster, and apologized if she had misunderstood. Chanso clarified that the hamster was not a familiar and asked her to explain further. Sujin proceeded to explain that the strength of a familiar depends on how many points are infused into its egg with blessings. She warned that overdoing it could break the egg, and that once it starts trembling intensely, it's best to stop. Chanso considered her advice, acknowledging that he would have to get a feel for it himself through practice. As they discussed schedules, Chanso mentioned that he was currently harvesting around 50 apples a day and planned to expand his crops even further in the future. Sujin was surprised by the volume and decided they would adjust the supply cycle to match. She even planned for a dedicated warehouse to handle the stock. After ironing out all the details, their first transaction was successfully completed. After the meeting with Sujin, Chanso went to check on the queen, still in the form of a radish, whom he had hidden before the hunt. He noted that she must have had a hard time staying hidden all this while. He also reflected on Sujin, thinking that she seemed kind and competent, but reminded himself that it was always safer to remain cautious. His attention returned to the contract and the amount of gold he had earned. Selling just a few apples had made him wealthier than he had ever imagined. Silently, he gave thanks to the goddess for this unexpected blessing. Meanwhile, the queen noticed the familiar eggs and clung to them, intrigued. Chanso, however, knew that to strengthen the eggs, he would need more points, which meant finding more regular customers. He reflected that the only monster he had fought so far was the immortal demon, yet things were going far better than he had expected. Thinking back on everything that had happened since he arrived, he felt no fear. On the contrary, he was genuinely excited for what lay ahead. The scene shifted to the office of the Circulation Trading Company, where Sujin sat with her boss, one of the apples she had brought spread out in slices on the table. They discussed Chanso, speculating whether he might be an apostle, a follower, or someone involved in alchemy. Sujin clarified that he was Korean and that his influence seemed tied to war or violence, or perhaps he was unaffiliated. Her boss nodded, pointing out that all apostles were Korean, so it wasn't unusual. He remarked that someone like Chanso, who could raise creatures in a combat faction, made sense. Sujin, trembling, added that with nothing but a rusty sickle, he had cut down hundreds of immortal demons, always aiming for their heads. Her boss, eating the apple slices one by one, suggested that Chanso might be training with handicaps to become a sword master, and advised her to focus on concealing him rather than guarding him. Sujin agreed, but as her boss reached for the last slice of apple, she grabbed his hand, interrupting him mid-discussion about selling apples to department stores. They ended up playfully fighting over the final piece. The scene then returned to Chanso, who was using his points to bless the eggs. He wondered aloud what kind of familiar he would get, referring to it as a child. As the egg began to glow intensely, cracks spread across its surface, drawing both their attention. Chanso speculated whether the creature inside would be cute or hardworking. Leaning closer, they watched as the shell split with a sharp crack and a beam of light burst forth from within. It was an SSS rank familiar, Patient. From the broken shell, a chick emerged. It was unusually large for its kind, fluffy, and bright-eyed, but still clearly just a chick. Chanso stared at it in disbelief. He couldn't help but replay the fact that he had spent 120,000 points on this egg. For that price, he had expected something majestic, a divine beast, a fierce guardian, maybe even a legendary creature. Instead, he was staring at what looked like a regular baby chicken. Meanwhile, the chick wandered around and began bowing toward the goddess, completely unaware of his disappointment. Disappointment washed over him. He had hoped for a reliable companion that could support him in his future plans. Instead, all he saw was potential poultry. A dry thought crossed his mind that if nothing else, he could always raise it and eat it later. It had been ages since he'd last tasted chicken. Even so, the feeling of letdown lingered. After spending 120,000 points, ending up with just a chick felt like a cruel joke. Despite his doubts, he decided to give the chick a name, though he reminded himself not to get too attached. Sitting down, he introduced himself to it and chose the name Ari. Before long, the chick pointed toward another egg that had started to crack. Chanso turned to it with a spark of hope, a small smile forming as he silently wished that this time, a hardworking familiar might emerge. When the shell finally broke, however, a tiny piglet appeared, sitting calmly and letting out a cheerful oink. Chanso's expression shifted between disbelief and resignation. Without much thought, he quickly named the piglet Doji. Frustration started to build inside him. He couldn't understand why his servant beasts kept hatching as potential food ingredients rather than useful companions. What was supposed to be the exciting promise of getting powerful familiars was beginning to feel more like a scam. Then something completely unexpected happened. Both the chick and the piglet lowered themselves respectfully, bowing before the goddess. They introduced themselves to the goddess of abundance as her 10th and 12th vassals, the chick still wearing bits of eggshell on its hips, and the piglet with a piece stuck to its forehead. The goddess sat on a rock before them, her expression heavy with sorrow. She admitted that it had been a long time and asked for their forgiveness, expressing regret that she hadn't been able to protect them until the very end. The chick quickly stepped forward to comfort her, insisting that it was they who had failed in their duties, not her. The piglet, eyes brimming with tears, declared its determination to help restore the goddess to her true, beautiful form. The goddess expressed her gratitude, but immediately issued a warning. She explained that they needed to be careful around her apostle, O Chanso. He did not yet know their identities as her vassals, and if he deemed them useless, he might sell them, or even eat them. Hearing this, both the chick and the piglet shuddered, imagining Chanso with a menacing look, pondering what to do with them. The goddess then advised them to behave and look presentable for him until he learned how to communicate with them. The piglet trembled, nervously wondering if the goddess's warning could really be true. The chick, however, stayed more optimistic, sighing as it reasoned that their apostle seemed fairly clueless. Together, they decided to keep a close eye on him for the time being. The next morning began like any other on the farm. Chanso stretched and got ready for his routine, greeting the immortal demons as he went. One by one, he sliced their heads, playfully wishing them good morning and calling them his dear customers as he continued his work. The sharp slicing sounds cut through the air, unexpectedly waking the chick and the piglet. The sleepy chick asked what all the noise was so early in the morning, while the piglet, still half asleep, mimicked the sound. As they opened their eyes, both of them freaked out when they realized that the terrifying noise wasn't some monster or disaster. It was just Chanso slicing the immortal demon heads. When Ari realized that the skill Chanso had used was called Decapitate, her feathers practically stood on end. Doji swallowed hard, his eyes watery and full of fear. As Chanso sliced off the head of one of the demons, it landed near them. Seeing it, both of them started trembling. Ari recalled how Chanso had looked at them the day before, almost as if he were licking his lips, and shared her thoughts with Doji. Doji hesitated, unsure if he believed it, but Ari was convinced. She imagined Chanso laughing, drooling, and thinking about eating chicken for the first time in a long while. The thought made her panic even more, thinking he really might eat them. Later, after a successful hunt against the immortal demons, confirmed by a green panel, Chanso settled back into his daily routine. Suddenly, he noticed Ari and Doji beneath him and asked when they had arrived. The vassals greeted their apostle with exaggerated enthusiasm, showering him with praise and greetings in their own language, even though he couldn't understand them. Ari stood on Doji's back, holding a towel for him. Chanso smiled and sat on one knee to reach for the towel. Seeing his smile, Doji froze in fear once again. Chanso thanked them warmly, calling their gesture thoughtful, and then used the towel to wipe himself. The scene shifted to Chanso handing out food generously. The piglet accepted it eagerly, unable to hide its excitement. Ari, watching silently, scolded the piglet in her mind, reminding it to maintain appearances instead of acting greedy. Chanso, clearly amused, praised the piglet's healthy appetite and encouraged it to eat as much as it wanted and grow big. As he watched Doji eat, a mischievous idea crossed Chanso's mind. He wondered if feeding the pig eating fruit might make the pork tastier, smiling at the thought of grape-fed pork becoming a delicacy. Ari overheard him and scolded the piglet, warning that it would turn into apple-scented pork belly. Chanso then turned to Ari and offered her a plate of apple slices. The delicious aroma made Ari drool, and she immediately thought that Chanso must have spent at least 500 points on the apples, a sum that a normal apostle could earn in an entire day. Nervously, she hesitated, determined not to fall into a trap. Chanso noticed with interest that Ari might not like apples and seemed far pickier than Doji. Thinking quickly, he put out a bowl of grains instead. Ari's eyes lit up at the sight, and she began to drool, thought that she wasn't like Doji and wouldn't get turned into fried chicken. Still, she couldn't resist her hunger and quickly started eating the grains. Life on the farm settled into a steady routine. Under Chanso's direction, Doji plowed the soil while Ari planted black beans. The earth was tilled, watered, and then blessed with the goddess's power. The process was so quick and efficient that Chanso turned it into a short 3-minute farming lesson, showing how simple everything had become with divine blessings. Silently, he acknowledged that the goddess's aid made the work far easier than it should have been. When the first harvest arrived, Chanso noticed Ari staring at the black, shiny beans, clearly drawn to them. He wondered if chicks were naturally attracted to shiny objects while reminding himself that they weren't crows. Before giving the beans to Ari, he remembered that the first harvest was always reserved for the goddess. The goddess eagerly jumped forward, holding the bowl filled with beans in both hands and absorbing them instantly. Chanso still hadn't grown accustomed to the way the goddess consumed offerings. It struck him as very strange. Later, as Chanso handed out the beans for everyone to eat, he mentioned that they would be planting potatoes and sweet potatoes next. Doji responded with eager delight, happily munching on the beans and admiring how tasty they were. Chanso recalled the previous meal, noting that Doji always ate well, but Ari wasn't much of a light eater. The hamster on Chanso's shoulder gestured for him to look at Ari, and eventually she gave in to her hunger as well, devouring the beans. After finishing their meal, both Doji and Ari lay down, burping contentedly. Ari, however, couldn't shake the thought that she might be doomed. Chanso, with the hamster perched on his shoulder and giving a thumbs up, was genuinely pleased to see them eating so well. He resolved to grow even more varieties of crops for them in the future. Suddenly, he remembered that the apples were scheduled to go on sale that day, and began wondering how the sales were going. Meanwhile, at the department store, preparations were nearly complete. The display was ready, with only the apples left to be placed. Sujin's boss stood back, observing the crowd, noting that no one had made the first move yet. The packaging was elaborate and luxurious, proudly displaying the bold name Emperor Apple with gold dust sprinkled over it and winter bird feathers for decoration. Each apple was priced at 200,000 G, which seemed to intimidate potential buyers. Free samples weren't allowed, leaving Sujin's boss anxious about how to attract customers. Meanwhile, the people in the crowd whispered among themselves, wondering why an apple could possibly cost so much. Unexpectedly, the staff began thanking someone for a purchase. Sujin's boss leaned forward, trying to see what had happened, while his junior pointed out the stock. They were all gone. Confused, the boss asked how that was possible, since there had been stock just a moment ago. The junior explained that a single customer had tried one apple and ended up buying the entire inventory. One of the staff added that the recipient had signed the name Rohan. The crowd erupted in shock and excitement as they processed the enormous sale. People quickly realized that Rohan had just bought out the entire stock and began murmuring excitedly among themselves. Suddenly, the boss recognized him. It was Rohan, the legendary sword master, pioneer of handicap training, and a figure admired across the land. Rohan walked away with a bag full of apples slung over his shoulder, happily munching on one and admiring how tasty it was. People gathered in disbelief, whispering and guessing what it all meant. News spread quickly through the district. Sujin's boss thought Rohan buying all their apples would just create a small buzz, but soon a breaking news report announced that the Sword Master's training food had been revealed. Apples, the daily staple of Rohan's legendary regimen, were now on the market. Online, people began speculating whether eating apples could make them Sword Masters too. When Sujin's boss saw the article, he panicked, wondering what kind of headline that was and how anyone had thought it was a good idea to publish it. Merchants all around were already scrambling to respond. In his office, Sujin's boss Ryu Wan's phone started ringing non-stop. People kept asking if apples could really make someone a sword master. Frustrated, he shouted that of course they couldn't and that the assumption was ridiculous. More calls followed, each filled with similar nonsense. Meanwhile, a huge surprise order of 100 boxes of apples. Ryu Wan yelled that it wasn't that simple, but by then it was too late. The apple craze had officially begun. Meanwhile, far from all the chaos in another world, a week had already passed since Chanso's arrival. Life there was peaceful and plentiful. Hamdal, Ari, Doji, and the goddess were enjoying black beans harvested from the farm, while Chanso, wearing an apron, said that now that their meal was ready, it was time for him to prepare his own food too. The table was neatly arranged with utensils and fresh vegetables. Picking up a potato and a sweet potato, Chanso remarked that they were just as delicious as the apples. He began peeling the potatoes and chopping the vegetables, carefully preparing all the ingredients. As he started cooking in the pan, his skill became clear in the way he handled the food and controlled the flame with ease. Hamdal the goddess and his familiars watched in admiration, clearly impressed by his talent. Doji, the piglet, stared at him with shiny eyes, drooling as the delicious smell filled the air. He muttered that the food wasn't for them and reminded them that they had just eaten, but everyone ignored him completely. Doji kept pleading with wide, sparkling eyes, refusing to back down. With a sigh, he finally gave in and offered Doji a bite. The piglet eagerly ate it straight from his hand. Just then, Hei Sujin arrived. She greeted Chanso, and he was genuinely happy to see her. Her eyes lit up with excitement when she noticed his familiars. She exclaimed that he had successfully hatched all of them, an achievement that made the scene 3 times cuter in her eyes. Meanwhile, the 3 familiars immediately surrounded the goddess, determined to shield her from the outsider and protect her no matter what. Chanso, however, didn't seem too worried about appearances and stayed calm amid the commotion. He kept his guard up as he acknowledged Sujin's comment about all the familiars hatching and asked what had brought her there. Sujin, wearing a cheerful grin and clearly excited, said she had some good news and asked if he wanted to hear it. Chanso crossed his arms and listened carefully, wary but attentive. Sujin then showed him the receipts, explaining that the apples had sold out for 2 days in a row, with the price soaring to 200,000 gold each. Chanso was stunned, holding his head in disbelief as he repeated the price aloud, amazed that it had happened for 2 consecutive days. Sujin just waved it off, telling him not to mention it and explaining that the chaos was because people simply couldn't get enough. He began calculating in his head. The apples weren't even considered expensive, priced around 900 gold. Were there really that many rich people? Then he considered his cut, about 30%, which meant 60,000 gold per apple for him. If he sold 50 a day, that would be around 3 million gold daily, translating to an annual revenue of roughly 1 billion gold. His imagination ran wild. He pictured himself wearing a gold chain, throwing money around and laughing, with Hamdal on his shoulder, his familiar piglet chewing on cash, and even the goddess adorned in jewelry. The thought made his face flush and his mouth water. He even imagined that if his plan worked, it might help him uncover clues about his parents. Clenching his fist at the thought of his past self, he refocused. Turning to Sujin, he said that department store fees were quite expensive, but since she had provided him with a hit product, he would negotiate as much as possible to lower them. Then he asked how long she thought the craze around the Emperor apples would last. He admitted he didn't want to ruin his fantasy, but expecting them to keep selling at 200,000 gold indefinitely seemed unrealistic. Sujin, however, reasoned that with 1 million potential customers, even selling just 100 apples a day could sustain the business for 27 years, and that over time, loyal customers would develop as well. Chanso asked again, worried if she wasn't expecting too many customers. Sujin reassured him, saying he didn't need to worry. Even if the numbers seemed huge by Earth standards, the market there was on the scale of China. Meanwhile, his familiars quietly kept the goddess hidden from Sujin. Then Sujin, holding one of Chanso's hands, suggested that he consider increasing apple production. Chanso proposed trying other crops first, claiming they were just as delicious as the apples. Sujin was shocked. Something could really be as delicious as the apples. In her surprise, she gripped his hand too tightly, cutting off circulation. That very evening, Chanso hosted a tasting session. He apologized for the wait and presented simple yet nostalgic dishes, starting with boiled potatoes. Sujin tasted them, blushing with sparkling eyes, and commented on their sweetness, the fantastic sweet and salty combination from the sprinkled salt, the nutty fragrance of the skin, and the perfectly fluffy texture. Chanso was thrilled by her reaction. He then brought out pancakes, fries, and roasted sweet potatoes, all of which he had prepared himself. The reaction was overwhelming. Sujin praised the dishes, saying they tasted good enough to be served in high-end restaurants and that the potato fries could even be considered a main dish rather than just a side dish. Chanso smiled, glad that they suited her taste, and announced that the final dish was roasted sweet potato, the one Doji went crazy for. Amid the laughter, the familiars went wild over the roasted sweet potatoes. Doji rolled around and squealed with pure joy, his excited oink-oink echoing as he demanded a share. Ari, meanwhile, looked thin and sulky. Chanso glanced at her and asked why she looked so skinny, revealing the culprit, saying Doji had stolen her portion. Meanwhile, Hamdal spotted the sweet potato in Sujin's hand and jumped up to lick it. Sujin blushed, thinking how cute and fluffy he was. Eventually, the conversation shifted back to business. Chanso considered selling these crops alongside the apples, but Sujin thanked him for the meal and reminded him that apple production had to take priority to meet the soaring demand. Chanso, worried, said it would be difficult without gaining more points, thinking he couldn't spend all his resources on growing crops. Sujin reassured him, expressing appreciation for his effort and asking him to focus on the apples instead of other crops. She explained that, as he knew, all the apostles were Korean, and the world's culture was heavily influenced by that. They were truly surprised by such delicious food, and even if other crops were in demand, they wouldn't fetch high prices or be as profitable as the apples. She emphasized that the demand for apples would continue to grow, while the gently squashed Hamdal between her hands stood there, as she begged him to consider her position. Sujin bowed to him, thinking about how, despite the high department store commissions and all the effort he had put into harvesting, he had even treated her to a meal. She worried about pushing him too hard. Then Chanso said that he could manage 100 apples a day. Surprised, Sujin asked if he was serious. That was when a deal was struck. Chanso would supply 100 apples per day. He thought there was no need to cling to the high road, but it was still worth trying. Still holding Hamdal in her hand, Sujin thanked him sincerely. The next morning, Chanso looked out over his farm with quiet satisfaction, followed closely by Ari and Doji. As they walked, Doji wondered aloud if it was right to keep following him all the time, especially since they couldn't really do anything. Ari scolded him, telling him to stop talking nonsense, and added that if they didn't watch over Chanso, who would? She insisted they couldn't let the dim-witted hamster handle it alone. His familiars trailed behind him in a noisy procession, still bickering. Chanso wondered why they kept following him everywhere and whether they could actually be combat types. Looking at them, he thought there was no way familiars were just freeloaders who only ate. Then, without warning, a guttural roar shattered the peaceful morning. An immortal demon lunged after Ari and Doji. Chanso patted his head in frustration, muttering that he hated himself for expecting anything, and that it was lucky the immortal demon was too slow. As the demon nearly reached Doji, the piglet panicked and cried. Chanso shouted, asking what it was doing and telling it to move. Even knowing he was too far to save Doji directly, he grabbed his weapon and swung. The next moment, as Ari opened her eyes through tears and fear, she realized Chanso's attack had struck. Doji, though terrified, was still alive, trembling but unharmed. A sudden realization struck Chanso that his skill's range had increased. He knew for certain that his sickle shouldn't have reached the demon from that distance. As the other demons drew closer, he began to wonder if his skill had been upgraded. He narrowed his eyes and adjusted his stance. Taking a deep breath, he activated decapitation. The blade sliced through the air faster than ever, effortlessly defeating multiple demons at once. As he analyzed the angle, positioning, and speed of his scythe, a green panel appeared before him, indicating that mass decapitation had been activated and that the range of decapitation had expanded. Thinking about the name mass decapitation, Chanso wondered what kind of name it was, then smiled, nodding that the range had widened. Turning to face the demons approaching from behind, he realized he could now attract more regular monsters. In a single sweeping motion, 4 or 5 monsters dropped at once. He continued swinging, defeating tens of demons in moments. Watching him, Ari and Doji clung to each other in fear and ran to the goddess, shouting that something terrible had happened. The goddess asked them what was wrong and why they were rushing back so frantically. Ari reported that the apostle had begun cutting off 4 to 5 heads at once. She added that while it was certainly impressive that he was growing stronger, perhaps it would have been wiser to prioritize his communication skill. The news left the goddess startled and uneasy. She told Ari to calm down, reminding her that she had never granted him such a skill. Still frightened, Ari admitted that she couldn't even eat properly. Doji, in contrast, explained calmly that the skill was called mass decapitation and asked if it had been granted by the goddess. Hearing the name, even the goddess felt a shiver of fear.